Alright everyone, welcome back to another faction overview for the Divide Et Impera Overhaul Mantra Total War Rome 2, and it is ya boy taking on the Boii. Everybody, welcome on back to another faction overview. Today everyone, we're checking out the Boii, otherwise known as the Boii, the boys, whatever you want to call them. I'm going to try to stick with Boii. I haven't narrowed down the pronunciation. I've kind of gone between that and Boii myself personally. For example, with the Nervii, I usually call them Nervii, not Nervii. But I'm gonna try and go with Boii just because the most recent sort of pronunciations I've heard have gone with this. So I'm going with that. Boii is what it is. We're checking them out. Go ahead and feel free to yell at me in the comments down below on pronunciations, please. Anyway, everyone, let's talk about the cultural buffs, cultural debuffs, and then we'll get into the campaign and check out the Boii overall. Let's do it. Okay, so the Boii are part of the Galli, or the Celtic Cultures group. They share the following buffs with the Scordici, the Nervii, Galatians, and the Averni. First off, Gallic horsemanship, +1 experience rank for Gallic cavalry recruits. Very, very nice for all of your Gallic cavalry units that you're going to get. That +1 XP does make a big difference. Druidic culture, increased population from temples when your culture is dominant. Very, very nice. Population is always a good thing to have. You can never have too much of. Not really in this mod anyway. However, what do the Boii have going on just for themselves? Well, first off, they have the Wild Rovers buff, which decreases recruitment costs for local units. Pretty nice. And then you have the Tribal Cooperators buff, which gives you a diplomatic bonus with other Celts. This is, for the most part, good, although it is a bit of a double-edged sword because you do want to be taking on some of the Celts as well. You want to steal their population, but we'll get to that shortly. And then we have the Ancestral Enemies debuff, which gives you a pretty big morale penalty against Germanic factions. Now this is going to hurt you quite a bit because you're going to be fighting Germans for most of your early game. So it kind of sucks. It's a little tricky. You need to be aware of this, especially when they have their scary units coming in and are using things like flaming arrows or outflanking you. Your units are going to be more susceptible to routing. Very scary. Anyway, everyone, let's go ahead and jump on into the campaign and let's check out the campaign situation for the Boii. Alrighty, everyone, here we are on the campaign map, checking out the Boii's starting position for the Grand Campaign in particular. Now, first off, everyone, you are a two-hitter quitter, actually. That's right, you have 2 settlements at the beginning of the campaign. You are inside the province of Hercynia. And you have the city of Casurgus as your capital, which is a walled settlement. No resources coming from it. However, to your southeast, you then have the city of Istros, which is a unwalled settlement which has gold in it. Very nice resource to have. You can see little cheeky gold mines over here. Very, very cool little animation. A lot of people miss out on the animations of the campaign map. Gotta give them some credit. Anyway, you start off with 1 army, led by your king in the city of Casurgus, but you have nothing else going on. You have no agents, no other armies, no navy, obviously because you are a landlocked faction. You only have 1 other settlement in your province that you don't have under your control, which is the city of Aberzus over here to the west, which I believe is owned by a Germanic faction. I'll double check that in a second when we check out your diplomacy. However, first let's check out your government position. Government and family, of course. First off, your family. You are the Boii chieftains. Your king is King Rhiannorix. Ooh, now that pronunciation. 22 years old. He's married to Vepia, who's 21. You have 2 sons, Acurio and Solicuri. 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So you do have some kids lined up ready to come on in. Something to keep in mind though, and this is a first, I've never seen this before for any other faction. Rhiannorix's wife, Vepia, is actually from another party, from the Council of Chieftains. I'm not exactly sure why this is. For example, we have Liskos here. Is this like his sister? Is this his mother? I don't know. I mean, she's 21, he's 18, but I have no idea why she is listed as being from another party. Very, very interesting. If any members of the DI team managed to see this or anyone knows, feel free to comment down below. But this is the first time I've seen this, at least on turn 1 of any campaign, which is pretty awesome. Just something cool to point out. And she has the quiet wife trait, so you can see right here, it's actually quite nice, very helpful. She's loyal, more likely to have kids, gives even a little bit of a public order bonus. Anyway, let's move on to your actual political standing. So you are a chieftain. Chieftains get extra military research. You do get that +1 experience ring for all recruits, so that's really, really nice. Because guess what? Your Gallic cavalry is going to have 2 chevrons of experience as soon as you recruit them. Wow, pretty friggin' nice if you ask me. You get a slight increase to tax rate. However, you also have a slight upkeep cost to all of your armies, regardless of where they're from. Your other 2 options are doing a tribal confederation, which can be okay, but I mean, do you want it? It's up to you. Helps your public order, tariff income from trade agreements itself. Big thing here for this is that it has a -10% upkeep cost for all of your armies. So this might be better for late game if you can handle the -10 loyalty for political parties. You then have the Empire government type, which typically, honestly, is just never really worth getting. That +8% to Empire maintenance is massive. It really will hurt your income. Plus the building cost, expansionism, diplomacy. I mean, really, changing to the Empire government type is only ever useful to actually change your name and have an emperor instead of a king. I recommend just sticking with chiefdom. It gives you the most practical, tangible benefits early on. You're not going to be making money off trade anyway, so who cares? Now, -10% upkeep from the Tribal Confederation would be nice, but I would honestly prefer to sacrifice some money to instantly have my Gallic cavalry at least with 2 chevrons. All of your other units are going to have 1 chevron, plus more as you add in a little bit more, training and whatnot. Anyway, that is it for your political situation. Starting off relatively balanced and whatnot, everything's going okay. So now let's move on to your external diplomacy though. Under the diplomacy tab, you have literally almost 0 trade agreements going on. Or agreements of any kind, sorry. The one agreement you do have is to the south. You have the Norii, however you want to call them, Norries. Good old Norries down here to your south. You do have non-aggression with them.
Greetings, friend.
They're quite friendly with you. You're very likely to get trade and more if you like. However, that does pull you down into the Roman sphere of influence. So if you get an alliance with them, they may try to drag you into the inevitable wars in which they will face off against the Romans. You know, might not be worth it. It's going to be up to you. But something else that's worth pointing out is that you do have the same blood as them. So in other words, if the Nori are about to get wiped out, they will be open to confederating with you, which means that you get control of their armies as well as their cities. You can also do the same with the Telingi to your southwest, and then the Erevaski to your southeast. But that's it, at least on turn 1. There are other Celts you can do that with, but that is it for the meantime. As I scroll up and down through the diplomacy, you can see that the majority of factions are relatively neutral with you. However, you do have the Lugos and the Marcomanni to your north who don't like you. They're Germanic. They're not going to be on good terms with you at all. It's just because of your debuff. However, they are very aggressive factions, so you probably will be fighting them early on. The Suebos also fall into this category. You then also have the Haraskos, who are Germanic, and then the Cimbri, who are even further north, who are Germanic. However, I usually see the Suebi doing the best. They typically will take out the other Germans. Eventually, it does take some time, but by the mid-game, the Suebi are usually the powerhouse in the region. Not always, but that's just my experience. So I would recommend you be aware of them. Anyway, that is essentially it for your diplomacy. I don't experience immediate wars from enemies consistently, so I can't say, okay, this faction right here is going to declare war on you. Not necessarily. Some other factions, it's like super obvious, but in my testing campaigns, I never consistently had a single faction declare war on me straight away. On normal difficulty. Keep in mind, everyone. It's the campaign difficulty I'm doing this on. This is for the average DI player. However, I would expect the Germans to be aggressive. Usually, once they're done with their other wars, they get distracted. The Suebi almost always end up fighting this faction over here, the Gastons and the Rugos as well. They all end up fighting each other. Whoever comes out on top will probably come for you. So I would expect aggression from the Suebi, from the Lugos. The Marcomanni are up here, but they're kind of way out of the way. Or any of these German factions. Basically, I'll zoom out a little bit further. You have this very wide arch to your north, in which you can expect aggression. Now, there is something very fun to keep in mind about this, which is your terrain, which is very, very defendable, as you can see. We'll get into that when we get more so to like the tips and advice section of the campaign, but just keep that in mind. Diplomacy overall is pretty basic, not really too much going on. Anyway, now we need to jump into your economy. Now, as a Celtic faction, economy is not going to be your strong suit. You don't even have a good starting province. While yes, you do have gold, which is very, very nice. It's going to give you a sort of short-term boost, and it's going to make factions more likely to trade with you, so that is helpful. But it's not going to make you a powerhouse straight away. It's going to take time. Even then, you don't have resources super close. You do have silver and lead out here. We have some animal hides and whatnot as well. I believe there might even be gold somewhere down here with the Dacians. Grain. To your west, you also have more animal clothing and whatnot. Animal tanning. Is that how you pronounce it? What's the actual term? Let me double check that so I'm not talking crap. Leather is just how they call it. Okay. But that's kind of it. You know, you need to expand a decent, at least sort of geographical set before you encounter many resource-rich factions. And everyone around you is a one-hitter quitter, so that is something that you will have that will help you with your economy, because your economy is essentially going to come down to looting, raiding if you like, although I don't find raiding to be all that helpful in giving you money, but taking settlements, sacking them, looting them is absolutely going to be at the forefront of how you're going to be making money. In addition to that though, agriculture. Just hovering over the agricultural sort of tree here, you can see that you have a lot of different potential options. I'm not going to go too in depth in what you should and shouldn't use. You even have this cool goldsmith building you can go with. But my experience, the best thing you can do is go down the agricultural tree, as well as try and loot all of the settlements that you're going to take, especially if you're taking like rich settlements. Go ahead, do that. Do the old Celtic way of earning money. But as you can see, you do have the gold mine sort of set that you can go down if you like, but industry and whatnot overall isn't going to be a strong suit for you, neither is commerce. Agriculture is where it's at, in my opinion. Now, something to keep in mind about your economy is that Swabia to your north does have 4 cities in it, one of which, or actually I believe 2 of which, have amber in them, and amber is an amazing resource. So going north and actually taking the entire province of Swabia is going to be really beneficial for you economically. But that kind of dives into a whole other can of worms, which we'll get into in a little bit. So that's your economy. Now your population, what's going on? On turn 1, your capital city starts off with 20,000 people. Not very good considering. As we're hovering over these statistics here, you can see it is increasing for the most part, and we are in the dead of winter, so that's good to see. And it's relatively spaced out and balanced. Your Civitate and your Wally or level 4 social class are absolutely sort of the pinnacle of what you'll be using early on. You have over 12,000 of your tier 3. That's very, very nice. So you're going to be okay early on just off that one city. Istros itself has 15,000 people. Here is your statistics for it. Not as balanced this time around, with more tier 3 and tier 4 population classes going on here. Tier 2 is very, very low, so your more elite units you would get from that tier 2 level are going to be pretty dire overall. So that's just something to consider. However, as I said earlier, you do have Germans to your north. You're Celtic, so obviously your culture isn't going to mix. But if we go back to the diplomacy screen very quickly, yes, the Ubii No, let's go Ubi. Are Germanic. However, to your southwest, the Telingi, the Nori, the Aravaski are all Celtic. Not only that, but as you continue cruising further south, and especially southwest out here, towards like Cisalpine Gaul, Raetia, etc., you have more Celts. And Celts actually comes the entirely pure dominant faction when you get into Gaul, obviously, right? It's essentially the home of the Celts. So if you wish to expand west, your population's going to do quite well, even if you go south. Population will do well. You'll be able to replenish your core warrior units very quickly. If you go north, take on the Germans, obviously it's not going to be the case. Even in your core province itself, Germanic is actually the dominant culture at 55% against your 45% Celtic. So population, in my opinion, it is going to be an issue, but it really depends on how you play. Especially in regards to where you go, but then what kind of units are you using? Are you using many of the mercenaries that are available to you? You have a province up here, province over here, and provinces down here. That means for every province, you can go and recruit mercenary units from there if you like. It's going to get into that more shortly in tips and tricks, but just keep that in mind. Population is not amazing. It's not very good even, but it's not bad. Float around pretty average for a barbarian faction in my opinion. Okay, so let's do a segment on what tips and general advice do I have for you about the campaign, or just in general, what are some major things you need to be aware of. So as I said earlier, your geography is going to play a very, very big part in your defense. So we're going to look over here, and I'm going to try and right click to send my army over here to take on the Lugos. Oh look, they can't. They try to march north. So basically you have this massive mountain range which neither you nor the Germans can get through. Same thing over here to your left, down here to your southwest, and then to your southeast as well. You do still have 4 access points. One right here, one right here, one over here, and then one over here. However, it is very, very predictable. These are all very defendable in multiple ways. So first off, all 4 different access points have forest. Forest is excellent for ambushing the crap out of your enemies. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of capital defense, especially when it gets to the late game. And let's say you didn't go south and now you have the Romans marching from Noria. Gonna be an issue, but you can ambush the hell out of them. And that's how you're gonna beat them. Istros down to your southeast has a similar sort of setup. Yet they can get approached from the east, so that's super far. Full of attrition out there for some factions. They have this road here, and then this road here. But again, surrounded by forest. And as we can see, if I zoom in a little bit further, we also have rivers. So you have a bridge crossing right there. You then have another one here on the north side of Coricus. Another one right here on the southwest side. And then way down here, you also have another river crossing. So river crossings pretty much galore. In addition to forested regions, which you can use to your advantage. And then even then, we can also see that the geography around your capital is quite hilly. So really, worst comes to worst, you could force the enemy to attack you while you put your army on top of this hill. They're going to be at a pretty big disadvantage straight off the bat. Essentially what I'm trying to get at is that defense in detail is going to be very, very tangible and effective for you. You might not want to march south straight away or for quite some time, so you can draw those bigger factions up north, lure them in, destroy their armies, and then counterattack, hit their cities. Just an FYI, it's a maybe. Something to consider. Now, next major thing to keep in mind is the Germans hate each other almost as much as they hate you. In fact, I would argue they hate each other more. So when you want to expand, you need to time this effectively. That doesn't just mean you need to wait until your army's ready. You need to wait until the enemy's armies are away. For example, the Swabi, one of the most aggressive factions in the game, they will go and march west, north, east, northeast-ish, or southeast. Any of these different directions. This is where you will do well to use your agents to keep an eye on the city. As soon as their armies leave, give them a turn or two, and then, well, bam, hit them. You can march on their capital within a turn, just about. Right here, it's the dead of winter. I can almost march the entire way. All I have to do is march my army right there. Next turn, I can hit the city, if I want. And it's a barbarian faction. Barbarians don't have very good walls or garrisons. So, keeping that in mind, that's your general sort of premise and playstyle for the campaign. Time your attacks when the enemy's busy. That's the barbarian way. You need to fight like a coward, to be honest. As, you know, nasty as it is to say, that is the reality of it. Your troops just aren't as professional or as well drilled, even well equipped as these southern westerners like the Romans, the Greeks, the Punic troops, etc. However, you do have very skilled warriors, so you need to give them the best chance they can have, and to do that you need to hit the enemy when they're not prepared. Now, one of the things that you're lacking as a Boii is cavalry. You do have some contingents that are useful, however, your skirmishing cavalry in particular is quite low. So something I like to just throw out there for you to keep in mind is that this province over here, the province where the capital is held by the Lugos, province of Lugia, has horse archers in it as a mercenary unit. It has some Sarmatians. Might be worth just sending like a general up here, just across the border right where my line is that I just drew. Get a horse archer unit, come on back, send them back up again in a few turns, just to see if they respawn. Just to give you that extra skirmishing firepower, especially if you're taking on those factions that do have good cavalry. For example, other Celts do have some nice heavy cab, and then the Swabi even has some decent heavy cab. Just something else to keep in mind. But then my last sort of major point to consider is that I would recommend you avoid going southeast. Because when you do that, you end up fighting Dacians. And guess what? The Dacians are actually really, really friggin' tough. They have good cities, good provinces, very defendable, just like yours. You can see right here. Zamizagatusa. Wow, I nailed it. Woo! Is surrounded by forest and mountains. So it's not going to be easy for you to go hit them in a discreet manner. And the AI does see you coming. When you park an army in their territory or on their border, they do recognize it and react. So I'm not just saying that, you know, be immersive. Although we do like immersion here. It really does make an impact for you. It will affect your campaign. So marching all the way down here just to take on the Dacian units, which almost their entire roster is full of armor penetrating units. Good luck with that, my friend. And even then, further to the east, you have the Scythians, the nomads, horse archers. Very, very good counter to your infantry-based armies. So good luck. Anyway, that's my last sort of major tip. I'll talk a little bit more about some of that in the verdict. Now though, let's talk about your reforms. Under your technology tree, we need to go to the warrior code. So this one right here with the big horse. We can see that you have your reforms listed here. Requirements for your Celtic reforms are going to be turn 90 Imperium 4. That's it. Reforms for you actually not very big. They give you some nice late game units, but by then turn 90, it is very, very late in the game, and everyone else already has these great units too. So you're kind of playing catch up. They are useful, and in fact, we'll talk about how useful they are when we get into the land units section. So everyone, that's all I have to say about the campaign situation overall. It's pretty decent considering you're a barbarian. I would honestly say you're one of the safest, at least early on. It's gonna get dicey, but that's how it is for any barbarian faction. So anyway, let's go ahead and check out the military of the Boii. See you all there. Alrighty everyone, here we are checking out the land forces of the Boii. However, first off, I do want to just briefly mention their naval forces. Considering they're a barbarian faction, the naval forces aren't too terrible. They actually have one of each of the major types of units. So they have a single archer ship, they also have a single sword, a single axeman, and a single spear-based unit per each different type of ship. So it's only going to be the one ship per unit, 950 HP as the maximum, so they're not very good in actual naval warfare. However, I can easily see you using their navy, which has 120 men per ship, for most of them by the way, except the archers, to be pretty useful at raiding enemy coastal cities. That's what I would use it for. That's about it though. Anyway, your land forces, the Boii. Let's go ahead and zoom on out. You can see they aren't the biggest roster in the world. However, they do have a very interesting and specific roster. In addition to being an area full of really fun AOR and mercenary units.
Noble horse!
So let's start off with your general, which is a noble horse. This is your early Boii noble bodyguard. Melee cavalry unit. The Boii don't really have any shot cavalry. They have melee cavalry, and it's quite solid. This is the early variant. There's a late variant, which you get after your reforms. Your early variant is your main sort of cavalry unit you'll have in the early game though. So that's why I thought I'd show it off. Looking very, very nice. One of the most immersive barbarian rosters I've seen. And this has been overhauled along with all of the other barbarians. So this is like one of the main times I'm checking out the roster. So it's always fun to see. However, they are Celtic and Western. So that means that they only have 100 men per unit for your cavalry rather than 120. And that's just how it is for all of your core roster units. Anyway, let's move on to your skirmishers.
Missiles ready!
You have Boii archers. You have 2 archer units. This unit is your levy entry level sort of archer. Nothing special about them, except armor piercing damage has come back again. Giving you a pretty solid total weapon damage of 31 in total. But melee attack is at 7, defense is at 3. So if you are going to get them to attack anyone, get them to recharge the enemy. That's it.
Gallic warriors!
However, then we have a really fun unit, your Boii Night Warriors. Look how sick these lads look. Oh my goodness. Looking terrifying, gents. Even the officer has got his paint on as well, although he's standing up. This is a fantastic unit. It's so much fun. 200 men in your unit of archers, which is nice. Not every archer has this. You then have the scary ability going on. They're also immune to fear. They are also impetuous, so this unit gets an extra morale bonus when they're eager. So get them, well rested before they jump on in. They can hide in grass, scrub, have guerrilla deployment, and can do all the other typical things that an archer can do. The one thing that they don't have though, which would have been nice, but they don't, is the stalk ability. They don't have stalk. So if you move them, they will be spotted on the battle map. If it's in line of sight. However, if they're just sitting here, they would be completely hidden even a big open field battle like this. So for you online players, this could be really helpful for you in online battles to catch the enemy off guard. Not only are they a great archer unit, but their melee stats are fantastic. A melee attack of 13. Disgusting. Very, very nice for an archer. Insane. Melee defense of 10. They have some big chunky shields that help out with that defense. Total weapon damage of 30. Unfortunately, their armor piercing damage is only at 2. Which is kind of weird since the description talks about axes, but mentions axes and swords. And they're still a typical archer. Range 165, pretty standard, not really great, but whatever. Ammunition at 15. Base morale is all the way up at 45 though, which is solid. Armor is at 8, so basically non-existent. You have a little bit of fur, that's all. Amazing flanking unit. I would absolutely use these in the majority of your armies, especially your ambushing based armies.
Skirmishers!
Then you have one unit of each of the rest of the different types of skirmishers. So you have your Boii skirmishers, which is a javelin based unit here. They are not only a javelin unit, but they're also a spear unit. So they have a spear that they'll fight with, and then they have these really big shields. So while I wouldn't have them hold the line, they could absolutely try to get involved into the melee. Are they going to kill many men? No. But they might be able to hold down briefly, or more importantly, they'll be good against cavalry. They can help your cav win those flanks by throwing in their javelins, of which they have 6 each. Well, 6 per man, and then after that, you can throw them in with that melee defense of 15, attack of 6, which isn't terrible considering how cheap and low tier they are. Alrighty, and then your last skirmisher unit is a Boii slinger. Almost not worth mentioning, except again that armor piercing damage does come in. So they are fighting with weapons, or melee weapons to say, that is going to do damage against like the Romans or etc. So they might be worth charging them into the rear of the enemy, except their attack and defense is terrible. Melee attack and fire defense are 2. But if they have a lot of experience, then more so in the mid to late game, once you have had them earn their chevrons, they could do some damage on a flanking charge. But that's it for your skirmishers. You only have 4 units. You are more archer heavy, as you can see. And your area where you start off with on the campaign map does have archers available as AOR mercenary units. So archers is the aim of the game for the Celts.
Levy free men!
Time for your spearmen though, of which we have 4 in total. So let's check them out. You have your Boii Levy spearmen. Again, very, very low tier. No ammunition for this, unfortunately. So it's not like vanilla Rome 2 Levy spearmen, who were insane with their javelins. These bad boys have none of that. However, they do have 300 men per unit, and their defense is okay at 12. Melee attack of 6. Total weapon damage is at 23 though. So really, all they're good for is plugging up the holes in like a line that appears, but they're not going to last long because they don't have any armor. I would recommend you just use them as a flanking supporting force, or when you don't have skirmishers in your army. They will do okay against enemy cavalry, but again, they're just not impressive at all. Pretty low tier, but they're going to be coming from your lowest sort of tier 3 social class.
Spears!
Boii light spearmen. These guys are quite similar, although the spear is, I believe, just slightly shorter. Doesn't matter. Anyway. Pretty decent spear unit now. This is where it's like, okay, this could maybe hold the line for a little while. Their armor is only at 15, but they do have a melee defense of 16, attack of 7, total weapon damage of 26, so it's come up a little bit. Bonus versus cavalry and elephants of 17 each. But they also do have a ammunition of 1, so that means that your 300 men have a single javelin to throw each, which can definitely get in some nice hit point damage, maybe even some kills against an enemy unit. Going to really excel as being a support for your cavalry, so that might be worth considering for yourself. After your Boii light spearmen, we then move on
We'll kill 'em all!
to your Boii noble spearmen. This is actually one of your general units you can recruit. This is where we're getting a lot more serious, a lot more professional. Armor of 30. First time I'm saying that for your military so far. Defense of 20, an attack of 9, 300 men in the unit. And they have the defensive formation ability. Bonus versus cav and elephants at 25. And they do have a javelin to throw into the mix. Fantastic spear unit. Absolutely beautiful. This could really provide you with an amazing front line, especially if you want to last long in combat. I recommend you use that.
As you say!
Defensive formation will really boost your stats to hold the enemy, although it does mean that you're going to be susceptible to being outflanked, because look how small that formation is. But, I mean, if you're doing a shorter formation, that's okay. Something to keep in mind though. Amazing unit, and it has the discipline, there it is, discipline buff. So, they're not going to suffer as much when you start taking losses. Really, really nice spear unit. Fantastic. That's why it's a general unit, right?
Warriors!
Okay, over here we have some warriors. Your Boii shield wall spearmen. I put them over here at the end. They're not the best unit you have. However, they are the only phalanx unit you have. That's right, this is actually a light phalanx unit. They have the shield wall ability.
Put up the shield wall!
When you use that shield wall ability, they are going to really be able to hold the line against your enemies. 200 men in a unit, which is kind of unfortunate. They don't have any javelins either.
Aye!
But this is going to be a decent sort of early to mid game frontline unit for you. Unfortunately though, their armor of 15 is really going to hamper them against skirmisher based armies. So I wouldn't use it against like Scythian horse archers and things like that. I'd much rather use your other sort of lighter spearmen that do at least have a javelin. But these guys can hold the line quite well. Defense of 17, attack of 7 is nothing to scoff at for a spear unit that's pretty early on, entry level ish. Not militia tier by any means, but it's an early spear unit. And that's it for you. For your spears at least. Now let's move on to your melee units. Okay, so now as we get into your melee troops, we are really going to see how your roster shines and where it excels at the most. First off, we have your Boii Assault Infantry. These are available turn 1 to you, 300 men per unit. They do have a single javelin to throw. Armor of 10, which isn't great, however this is the lowest sort of entry level unit you have. Attack of 7, defense of 10 isn't terrible, considering again it's a turn 1 unit. And they have a good solid melee weapon damage. On its own is 15 plus 16 of armor piercing damage, so you're getting back to 31 weapon damage, more than half of which is armor piercing. Very, very nice swarm based unit to have in your army early on, especially to target those more armor dependent units. For example, the Germanic heavy swordsmen, they will do quite well. They'll still lose, but they'll do a lot of damage.
They will bleed for us.
We then move on to your Boii heroic swordsmen. These guys are essentially your very early tier shock infantry. Incredible, 17 attack, defense of 13 as well, which is really insane to say. Total weapon damage of 34. However, their armor, as you can see, is not all there. These are some Chad Lantians. They think their abs will cut it. Unfortunately, it won't for them. Armor is only at 10. Base balance at 54 though. And they do scare everyone around them. And they're immune to fear. So, absolutely amazing unit to have in your army. But if they get hit by a butterfly thrown from a javelin, whatever, they're gonna die. They'll die quite quickly. So let them do melee fighting. Don't let them get charged by cavalry or get hit by skirmisher fire. Fantastic looking roster so far though. Hope you're all noticing. Looking very, very immersive. Even the low tier units. Very easy for them to just look all the same, but somehow, the team is just doing incredible.
We'll kill them all.
Here we actually have your first dedicated Axeman unit. And in fact, it's your actually only Axeman unit, specifically Axeman. But its stats are fantastic. This is a really solid heavy axe unit. You have an attack of 9, defense of 11, charge bonus of 28, which is almost like low tier cavalry level. And then your weapon damage goes all the way up to 33, 14 of which is armor piercing. Again, nothing to scoff at, right? Nothing to just ignore, nothing to have a giggle at. These guys are here and they're not here to mess around. Armor of 30, which is insane, and then they have a single javelin throw as well. Beautiful, beautiful unit to bring into battle.
Scrappers ready.
We then move on to your early Bowie medium swordsmen. These guys are essentially a staple for you to form a core front line with them if you want a more mobile front line. However, their low armor at just 15 means that they're not going to hold the line for a massive amount of time. Defense is at 12, so that will help. An attack of 15, which is really, really nice. Total weapon damage 32. Do have a javelin as well, but they're only 200 men in a unit. So basically, if you want to use a sword-based front line in the early game, this is a unit you'll use early on for a little while. But they're not really that reliable in terms of lasting too long. So that's going to be an issue for you if you go up against those skirmisher-heavy or cavalry-heavy armies. They're going to get annihilated. Now, everybody, oh my goodness, we get into the long schlongs. Look at this, far out. That sword is bigger than my future, everyone. These are your Celtic sword masters. Incredible, fantastic, awesome to look at. Shock infantry. Melee attack of 17, however, a melee defense of just 5. Terrible defense, but the weapon damage is insane. It's out of this world. I'm not sure if I've even ever said this number for an infantry unit. The total weapon damage for your Celtic Swordmasters is 38, as in 3 and 8 put together. You have a total weapon damage of just 25 on its own, plus 13 armor piercing damage. That is just incredible. That is disgusting. It's kind of scary. I don't know what you could do to stop this besides hit them with skirmisher fire from a distance. But even then, they're going to last for quite a while because they have armor 25. They don't have a shield though, which is really the massive downfall. They even have a bonus versus elephants of 29. They don't have it against cavalry, just bonus of 5 against cav, but I mean, screw it, we'll take it, right? Do have no javelin throw though. Base rounds at 48. But yeah, these guys are like the bear warriors for the Celts, except they're better than bear warriors. Have better damage, I'd argue. But their defense is quite low. So they can still do good in a grind out fight, but you need to try to recharge the enemy or charge an enemy unit that isn't going to be doing a whole lot of melee attack. They can have high damage, but don't let them have high melee attack, if possible. Incredible unit. Looks fantastic. Disgusting.
They will bleed for us.
We then have your late Boii swordsmen. Now these guys are what comes after your reform, so that's why I put them at the end here. Melee attack of 15, which we've seen before. Defense of 12, seen before that. Total weapon damage of 32, however their armor is all the way up to 35. And they now have the discipline buff down here along with defensive formation. So this really is an excellent late game core unit for you to have in your roster. These guys will form the core of your late tier armies. They will give Roman legionaries a run for the money. They'll still lose to them, but this is the closest you will ever get to having Roman legionaries in your army. Just an FYI, but you don't get them until turn 90. So, you know, it's nice to have, but don't think of them too hard. But that's it for your melee troops. As you can see, your melee men, soldiers, warriors, whatever you want to call them, are the main focus of your army. You are absolutely an infantry-based faction. So speaking of which, though, let's move on to your cavalry. You can see all 3 of them down here. That's it.
Light horse!
So you have Boii light cavalry, which is a skirmisher cav unit. Oh, sorry, this is your one unit that has 120 men. Forgot they did. But that's it. They throw javelins. They're very fast, but their attack defense is pretty bad. Charge pretty bad. Armor pretty bad. Everything about them is pretty bad. They're scouting cavalry unit. They could run down the enemy, or they could do some damage with their javelins. But they only have 6 javelins, so I mean, is it worth your investment? I would say they're useful, but I'm not going to get like 4 of them. I'm going to get like 1 or 2 to do some scouting and raiding. That's it.
Noble horse!
Moving on though to your melee cavalry. So we have your early Boii noble cav. This is the general's unit that we saw earlier, but you can recruit it as a cavalry unit. Very, very helpful. However, let's move on since we've already seen that unit.
Heavy horsemen!
You then have the late variant, the late Boii cavalry. Now just comparing statistics, as we can see, the bottom left hand corner, all of the stats for the late Boii noble cav go up in every single regard. They're just way better. They're not available until you hit your, I believe it's pronounced Nitos reforms at turn 90, 94. But going to be an excellent unit for you to use for your general and just having your army as well. They will annihilate like all Roman melee cavs, so that's nice. They'll win eventually, and they are disciplined. So this is just a fantastic unit to have in your army. Is it the best melee cav? Absolutely not. Germans will give you a good run for your money, as will your Celtic brethren. But for taking on like the Romans, I would absolutely just charge these on in against Roman Imperial cav. You'll take some losses, but I mean, you have so many different types of units that can support. You should be winning the flanks relatively easily when you have access to this unit. Early on though, your early Boii noble cav are nice, but they come from tier 1 social class, so you know, good luck with that. Anyway, that is it for your Boii military roster. Relatively small roster, however, I wouldn't say it's limited or it's bad by any means. You have a whole bunch of melee troops which give you different playstyles on their own. You have fast moving axemen, you have fast moving shock infantry. You also can provide a more professional sort of standard melee mid-tier solid line with your swords as well. So you could do very fast, or you could do sort of standard stuff. You then have your spearmen, all of which will work very well on the flanks, but then you even could provide a phalanx or a nice heavy spear center if you can afford the population and money. Skirmishers are one of your biggest downfalls. However, your Bowie Night Warriors are just fantastic. Like, use them in every army. Why wouldn't you? Incredible unit. Then your absolute biggest downfall is cavalry. You only have one skirmisher cav unit and then 2 melee cav, which is basically the 1 unit cav, melee cav really. So when it comes to mercenaries, you're really going to need to focus on cavalry to bolster your ranks. Anyway, everyone, despite this though, I still feel like this is a not so difficult faction. Why do you think that, Charlie? I'm glad you asked. Let's go ahead and jump into the verdict section of this video, and then we'll end it there. Alright everyone, so a few final points, my closing statement, and then the difficulty level rating of the Boii. First off, you are the Boii. You have a pretty solid melee roster, and you also have a pretty solid defensive position in the early game. You're one of the very few barbarian factions that actually has 2 cities, or more than one I should say. So that immediately gives you a massive head start ahead of pretty much every other barbarian faction you can play as in the campaign. At least in terms of Germans, Celts, Western barbarians overall. So that's a massive advantage. Not only that, but it's a good strategic position. You have walled settlements and you have gold. Overall, your starting position, you're actually starting off as one of the easiest and one of the best sort of Celtic factions early on, in my opinion. However, next point is your mid game. Mid to early is going to be dominated by you dealing with the Germans. You're going to have to fight them. It's unavoidable. Not only that, but you should fight them because you have resources that you can get from them. You have the strategic area to fall back to. Falling back into Germania is always a valid option if you get way too much heat from late game Imperial Rome or something like that. However, Amber is an amazing resource to get, and you have 2 slots of it up in the north. Go ahead and get it. It will help you out in every single way possible. Absolutely going to be a must grab. Go ahead and just knock out the Germans when you can. Why wouldn't you, right? But that's point number 2. You will have to fight them, so just beware that they're going to fight in a different style of combat. They're going to have different units to what you might otherwise typically be used to if you're like me and you're a Hellenic or Romophile. You just love playing as the Romans or Hellenic factions and that's it. If you try the Bowie, you're still going to do well, but you're going to have to play differently and you have to accept that everyone around you is going to do the same. I wanted to reiterate what I said earlier about where not to go. I would really avoid going southeast. So you don't want to end up fighting the Hellenic factions. You don't want to end up fighting the Scythians and Nomads to your far east as well. Both types of cultures are very specifically tuned to outclass you. They have better heavy infantry with the Hellenic factions. Their pikemen will shred through your massive hordes of, half-naked swordsmen. Their cavalry is far better than yours. Their skirmishers far better than yours. The Nomads are going to be very infuriating for you to deal with. You don't have the cavalry to deal with them. You don't even really have long-range skirmishers to deal with them, just a single slinger. You do have archers, but, archers, not as helpful in dealing with horse archers. But bottom line is, Nomads and Hellenic factions in particular are going to be a major pain in the butt for you, especially later on in the late game, which is pretty much by the time you'll get there, it'll be mid to late game. It's going to take you a while to get down to Hellenic control Greece, or further east to Scythia unless you really push. But even then, to get against those difficult factions, you got to take on the Dacians and the Odrysians, Thracians. All of those factions are just designed to dismantle you. Stay in Western Europe, focus on Celts, focus on Germans, and focus on Rome. Because my last point, everyone, is that Rome is your adversary in the late game for this faction 100%. Now, Rome doesn't necessarily expand north into the heart of Germania, where you are going to be expanding, basically where you are. You're in central southern Germany. However, by late game, Rome is always a juggernaut, and they're just looking to take on whoever they can. Unless you really maneuver yourself to be diplomatically on their side, which you can, but unless you do that, they are going to fight you. And their armies will be better than yours in pretty much every respect. You do have some nice heavy melee cav, and you do have some excellent shock infantry, but I mean, is that going to be good enough? That's going to be up to you, to be honest. I personally think the Romans will still smash you just because they're going to be pumping out so many armies and their population is never ending. It's just so hard to deal with. So if you do want to take on the Romans, you're going to require some extra help. Get allies that will help you against them. Get mercenary and AOR units that will help you. It might be worth for you to send a general down to the southeast and recruit some Odrysians, Thracians, some Rum Fire warriors essentially into your army and bring them back north. They will do wonders for you throughout the entire campaign. So I recommend you do send a single general or go recruit some mercenaries. But that'll help you throughout the entire thing. But anyway, everyone, that is some overall stuff to keep in mind. Thrown a lot at you in this overview, so now it's time to do our difficulty rating, everybody. I would love to hear what you all think the difficulty rating for the Boii is. However, in my opinion, this is going to be a 6 out of 10. This is an above average difficulty rating, everyone. They're not quite to the point where it's just like a normal average campaign, because it's barbarian and because it's going to be pretty difficult in terms of who you're facing off against. However, you're also one of the best starting positions, strategically speaking, barbarian-wise. So, you know, it's definitely not hard or very hard. I mean, it could cross into that sort of territory. But I think for most standard Boii factions, you have to put in some extra strategy, some extra effort. You have to be aware of the new playstyle that you're probably not used to. But beyond that, you should still have a good campaign. It should still be quite winnable for you. So to me, this is floating around a 6 out of 10. It could easily go to be a bit harder, but it really depends on the dice roll of what the AI decides to do, what you decide to do as well, what direction you go, etc. But that's Total War. You're never going to know 100% how easy or hard a faction is. The Boii, it really depends on what you do and what the AI does. But in my testing myself, I didn't find the AI to actually target me too much in the early game. I mean in the first 10-20 turns. And that gave me time to hit the enemy when I was ready. And even then, I used units that I knew would wipe out theirs, strategies to deal with them, river crossings, ambushes, all of that. So I think this is a 6 out of 10. I would love to know what all of you think, all of you experienced barbarian players in particular. Go ahead and let me know. But anyway, everyone, I chose this faction because you all voted for the faction that you wanted to see. So I'm going to be posting another community poll, including a bunch of different factions in which I would like for you all to vote on. Comment down below in the comments as well. What faction would you like to see an overview on next? This is our first faction overview of 2024, so Happy New Year to all of you. I recommend that you check out the Discord, as I did post an announcement on what you can all expect content-wise to come in the new year. Have some awesome plans. I have a new computer and I have more time to record. So everyone, this is going to be our year. I can't wait to go on this journey with all of you and continue being immersive on this channel and just having a good old time with all of you. It's been a couple years already. It's been a couple bumpy ones, but this is our time to bring it back and have an amazing year. So anyway, everyone, I wish you all nothing but the best. Peace and blessings to all of you and your families for this year. In the meantime, go ahead and vote for what faction you would like to see next. I personally would like to do the RDA, just because we haven't checked them out yet. Someone let me know how to pronounce that faction, please, down below. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.